Imagine this. You wake up one morning, skip a shower for just 2 days, and already you feel sticky, smelly, uncomfortable in your own skin. Now imagine skipping not 2 days, not even 2 weeks, but 8 whole months on purpose. That's exactly what Queen Isabella of Castile did. She wore her filth like a badge of honor. And here's the disturbing truth. She wasn't even the dirtiest one. We're taught to imagine medieval royalty as glowing figures in sparkling gowns, gliding through candlelit halls that smell of roses. Painters captured them looking pure, elegant, untouchable. But those portraits lied. Behind the jewels and gowns was something far darker. The truth is, the average peasant washing in a muddy river once a week was far cleaner than most queens. The servant scrubbing the palace floors had fresher skin than the woman wearing a crown. And today I'm going to show you exactly what life really smelled like under those layers of silk. What was writhing inside those powdered wigs? Why queens painted their teeth black on purpose? Why one beauty treatment required lying in a tub of blood while maggots fed on the grease in her hair? By the end of this, you'll understand that royal treatment in the medieval world often meant rotting flesh, parasites, and faces literally falling apart. So let's start with something as simple as a queen waking up in the morning. When sugar arrived in Europe in the 1500s, it was more expensive than gold. Only the royal elite could taste it. Queen Elizabeth, I couldn't get enough. She ate sugared violets for breakfast, candied ginger between meals, and a treat called marchpane, which was basically pure sugar paste for dessert. Here's what that diet did to her. By 40, her teeth were stained brown. By 50, they were black. By 60, many had rotted out. Ambassadors wrote that when she opened her mouth to speak, the stench was so unbearable they had to stand several feet away. A German visitor described it bluntly in 1597. He said her breath reeked like a rotting horse. But the strangest part, it became fashion. Court ladies saw her black teeth and thought that's the look of wealth. So they painted their own teeth black to copy her decay. Some smeared soot. Others mixed honey with charcoal, which actually sped up their tooth rot. Imagine a glittering ball at Windsor Castle. Noblemen and women laughing, dancing, smiling, and every grin revealing rows of blackened teeth dripping breath like open graves. An Italian ambassador summed it up best. The English court smells like a graveyard covered in roses. Perfume wasn't a luxury there. It was survival. Because tooth rot wasn't the only odor filling those gilded halls. Let's talk about what nobody likes to discuss. What royal women did during their periods. Forget sterile pads or cotton. Medieval queens used rags, strips of old cloth reused over and over. These menstrual cloths were rinsed in cold water, hung up to dry, and then placed back on the body month after month, year after year. But here's where it turned stomach-churning. Those rags were often washed in urine. Stale urine was medieval Europe's laundry detergent, collected in chamber pots and left until it turned into ammonia. It was used to scrub clothing, so the same fabric pressed against a queen's most sensitive areas had been steeped in human piss. One German princess wrote in her diary in 1456 about the stench in the court hall when several noble women were menstruating at once. She described how the Duke ordered all windows thrown open in the dead of winter because the smell was unbearable. Some women tried alternatives. They stuffed moss into little pouches. Ironically, sphagnum moss actually does kill bacteria, but they didn't know that. They just knew it soaked up blood, and of course the moss wasn't properly cleaned. It sat damp, rotting, used for months until it grew its own colonies of bacteria. And remember, women didn't bathe during their periods either. Doctors warned that immersing a menstruating woman in water might block her flow and kill her. So every month, queens added another thick layer of filth to their already unwashed bodies. And on those bodies lived entire kingdoms of crawling things. Every single royal woman in Europe had lice. It was so normal that delousing was part of the daily routine. Picture a queen sitting every morning while servants combed through her hair for hours, picking out lice and eggs, gathering them on a special cloth before burning it. Queen Isab of Bavaria once suffered such a massive infestation that her hair had to be cut off. Her physician gave up counting after finding more than 1,000 lice in just one section of her scalp. But here's what's shocking. Many believed lice weren't pests at all but holy gifts. Some thought they spontaneously appeared on dirty skin. Saint Margaret of Hungary refused to wash, letting lice crawl over her face as she prayed. Each bite, she said, was a blessing from God, and the fleas even worse. Palaces were infested. The rush mats covering the floors were never cleaned, and fleas swarmed in them. At Hampton Court, witnesses said the floors actually moved with jumping fleas. Noble women wore flea traps under their dresses, little tubes filled with honey or blood to lure the fleas away. Some even had flea dogs, little pets whose only purpose was to attract the insects away from their mistress's skin. But body lice were the worst of all. They lived in the seams of clothing and came out only to feed. Since gowns were almost never washed, lice colonies became permanent residents. When archaeologists opened the tomb of Queen Isabella of Aragon, her burial gown was still filled with dormant lice eggs 500 years later. And when queens fell sick, the cures were sometimes more revolting than the illnesses themselves. A headache. Doctors smeared fresh bird droppings onto the forehead. Skin disease bathed in the urine of virgin boys collected each morning as a royal duty. But the worst treatments were for women's health. Queen Catherine of Aragon desperately wanted a son. Her doctors made her sit over burning goat dung for hours so the smoke could wake up her womb. The fumes scorched her most intimate parts. Other women were told to insert pessaries made of crocodile dung mixed with honey inside their bodies. These were not peasant remedies. These were royal prescriptions by Europe's finest physicians. And childbirth was the deadliest of all. A royal birth was a spectacle and a death trap. Windows sealed, doors locked, the air heated to suffocating levels, and no one washed their hands. Queen Jane Seymour, Henry VIII's third wife, died just 11 days after giving birth. Her doctors had gone straight from dissecting corpses to delivering her baby without washing their hands. They carried death under their fingernails. Even the tools weren't cleaned. The same bloody forceps that killed one woman might be wiped on a rag and shoved inside another. If the queen survived and later caught syphilis from her husband's infidelities, her cure was mercury rubbed onto her sores. As the saying went, a night with Venus, a lifetime with Mercury. Teeth fell out, hair disappeared, and madness soon followed. By the 1600s, queens shaved their heads and wore towering wigs made of human hair, often cut from corpses or the desperate poor. These wigs were styled with animal fat and powdered with flour. The result, a paradise for vermin. Servants sometimes found mice nesting inside wigs. Fleas and lice thrived. The fat went rancid, drawing maggots. Queen Christina of Sweden once removed her wig during a council meeting, and witnesses saw a river of lice spill down her scalp. She laughed and called them subjects who never abandoned their queen. Wigs were rarely cleaned. Instead, they were dusted with powder made of flour mixed with lead. So on top of crawling insects and rotting fat, these women inhaled clouds of poison. One French duchess leaned forward at dinner, and maggots tumbled from her wig onto her plate. She calmly brushed them aside and continued eating. At night, wigs were set on stands where rats came to gnaw on the fat and flour. In the morning, they were powdered again and placed back on infected, sawed scalps. The outer gowns, worth more than a peasant's house, were almost never cleaned. Instead, they were smoked over fires with herbs to mask the stench. Some gowns rotted right off women's bodies as the fabric decomposed. Others were laced with poison by enemies, soaked in arsenic or mercury that slowly seeped into the skin of the unsuspecting wearer. It became so common that queens hired dress testers, servants forced to wear new gowns first to see if they died, and then there were the holy women who embraced filth as devotion. Queen Isabella of Castile refused to change her underwear during the siege of Granada. For 8 months, her garments fused with her skin until they had to be cut off. She considered it a holy triumph. Saint Elizabeth of Hungary slept in her own waste. Saint Margaret of Hungary praised her lice as divine blessings. This wasn't insanity. It was celebrated as piety. And then came the Blood Countess Bay of Hungary. Legend says she murdered 600 girls and bathed in their blood to stay young. Imagine the reality. Human blood clots within minutes, turns brown, stinks of rot. Servants testified that they scraped her skin clean of congealed gore, while the stench of rotting blood made them vomit. The fact people even believed these stories shows just how filthy and believable such practices were. In a world where queens already bathed in milk, painted their faces with poison, and sat over burning feces.